Inside a sacred pouch worn over a priest's heart, a single hand reaches in among a cluster of engraved gemstones. In a moment, this priest will ask a question no human being can answer, and something inside this pouch will answer it. For centuries, the priests of ancient Israel carried an object that let them ask God direct questions and receive a direct answer. Not a prophecy, not a dream, a yes or a no. And to this day, no one is fully certain how it worked. This object had a name. 2 names, actually, always spoken together, the Urim and the Thummim. They are first mentioned in the book of Exodus, in the instructions for the clothing of Israel's first high priest, Aaron. God commands that they be placed inside a pouch, and the pouch fastened to the priest's chest. That pouch was called the breastpiece of judgment. Set into its front were 12 precious stones, one for each tribe of Israel, arranged in 4 rows of 3, each stone engraved with a tribal name. Behind those 12 named stones, in a hidden inner pocket, sat the Urim and the Thummim, smaller, unnamed individually, and never once described in any real detail. The text tells us where they went. It tells us who carried them. It even tells us, roughly, what they were used for, but it never once explains what they actually were, or how they physically produced an answer. That silence is not an accident of translation. It is in the original text itself. Whatever these objects were, the people who wrote this down assumed everyone already knew, and never felt the need to say. So what do we actually know? We know who was allowed to use them, when they were used, and what kind of questions they were built to answer. Only the high priest could consult them, and only on behalf of the nation, never for a private matter. This was a tool of national leadership, used before wars, before journeys, before decisions that would shape the whole people. And the questions had to be simple. Every account we have shows a yes or a no. Go up, or do not go up. Attack now, or wait. Nothing more complicated ever survives in the record. That simplicity is itself a clue. Whatever mechanism was inside that pouch, it was built to give a binary answer, not a sentence, not a vision. Something closer to a verdict than a conversation. The very first recorded use comes early, in the days after Moses, when leadership passes to a soldier named Joshua. God instructs Moses that Joshua must stand before the priest, who will inquire for him by the decision of the Urim before the whole community. Leadership itself is being formally handed over, and this object is part of the ceremony. From that point on, entering the promised land, the Urim and Thummim guide the nation's biggest decisions. Which tribe attacks first? Which direction to march? Whether to fight at all? Later, when tribal land is divided among the 12 tribes of Israel, the text says it was allotted by lot before the priest and the leaders, a process closely tied to this same sacred practice of sacred decision-making. For generations, this was simply how Israel made its most important calls. Quietly, formally, through a priest, a pouch, and an answer only he could read. But the clearest picture of how it actually felt to use this object comes centuries later, in the story of Israel's first king. His name was Saul, and his story with the Urim does not begin with an answer. It begins with silence. The Philistine army was gathering for battle, vast and terrifying, and Saul was afraid. He sought guidance from the Lord, and the text records, with chilling plainness, that the Lord did not answer him. Not by dreams, not by prophets, and not, the text specifies, by the Urim. Think about what that means. This was the nation's direct line for a yes or a no, and for its own king, in his moment of greatest need, it produced neither. Just silence. Cut off from every sanctioned channel, Saul made the choice that would end his reign. He turned to a medium at Ender to summon the dead prophet Samuel instead, breaking the very law he himself had enforced. The message that came back was not comfort. It was a confirmation of the silence he had already received. His kingdom was already lost. The Urim had not refused to answer by accident. It had already spoken, by staying quiet. Saul's story shows the Urim's power in the negative. But across the valley, at almost the very same time, a different man was using the very same object, and getting very different results. His name was David, and before nearly every major decision of his early career, he asked the same simple question through the same sacred object: shall I go up? Before rescuing a besieged town, before deciding whether to pursue raiders who had taken his own family, before choosing which city to make his base. Again and again, the text says simply, he inquired, and the Lord answered. Where Saul met silence, David met answers, clear enough to build a kingdom on. The same object, used by two different men, told two entirely different stories. So what were these two names actually pointing to? Even that is a puzzle, hidden inside the Hebrew language itself. Urim is widely thought to come from a root meaning light, or to curse, or to shine. Thummim is tied to a root meaning perfection, completeness, or truth. Together, ancient interpreters read them as something like lights and perfections. Some ancient Jewish sources went further, describing letters on the 12 tribal stones themselves that could miraculously light up or stand out in sequence to spell an answer, letter by letter. The ancient historian Josephus, writing centuries later, claimed the stones on the high priest's breastpiece would shine with an unusual brightness whenever God was present to grant victory in battle, a visible sign the whole army could see. Other Jewish traditions describe something closer to a formal ritual of casting or drawing, similar in form to the sacred lots used elsewhere in the ancient world, though set apart by whose hand was believed to guide the outcome. None of these later traditions can be proven. They were written centuries after the practice had already ended, by people trying to make sense of the same gap in the text that still puzzles us today. To understand the real object, it helps to step back and look at how the wider ancient world sought answers from the divine, because Israel was not alone in wanting a yes or a no. Across Mesopotamia, priests read the future in the markings on a sheep's liver, a practice so systematic that clay models were made to train new priests in every possible pattern. In Egypt, priests carried processional images of the gods, and the direction the image tilted, forward or backward, was read as the god's own answer to a question asked aloud. In the wider region, small carved bone or stone lots, called astragali, were cast and read like dice, a method so common that archaeologists still find them scattered across ancient sites today. Israel's version stands apart in one crucial way. It was never treated as magic that compelled an answer. It was framed, from the very first instructions in Exodus, as a channel through which God himself chose whether, and how, to respond. That is why Saul's silence mattered so much. In the surrounding cultures, a ritual either worked or it was performed wrong. In Israel, silence itself was treated as a real and devastating answer. So the Urim and Thummim were not just a tool. They were a statement that the God of Israel spoke, or withheld speech, by his own will, not by the mechanics of the ritual itself. And for as long as that channel stayed open, it shaped the nation's history at its most critical turns. But that channel did not stay open forever. By the time Solomon built the Great Temple in Jerusalem, the priesthood, the sacrifices, the festivals, all of it is described in loving, exhaustive detail. The Urim and Thummim are barely mentioned at all. A few scattered references appear in the histories and the Psalms, almost in passing, as though the practice were already fading even while the kingdom was at its height. Then Solomon's kingdom split, fell into decline, and the Babylonian armies finally destroyed the temple itself. The priesthood was scattered into exile, far from Jerusalem, far from the sanctuary the Urim was tied to. Decades later, the exiles were allowed to return home and begin rebuilding, and it is in the records of that return that the object makes its final, quiet appearance in Scripture. Certain priestly families returning from exile could not prove their lineage in the official records. The ruling governor made a decision about them, one line long, and almost impossible to miss once you know what to look for. He ruled that these priests could not eat of the most holy things until a priest could consult the Urim and Thummim to settle the matter. Not until one arrived. Until one could be consulted at all. That single sentence is the last time the working object appears anywhere in the biblical record. After centuries of guiding a nation, it simply is not there when the nation needs it most. It never reappears in the rebuilt Second Temple. Later Jewish writers describe that temple's history in detail, and are unusually candid about what, exactly, was missing from it. Ancient rabbinic tradition lists the Urim and Thummim among a small handful of sacred things present in the First Temple that never returned in the Second. The Ark itself is on that same short, haunting list. So somewhere between the fall of the First Temple and the return from exile, this object was simply lost. Not destroyed in a recorded event. Not banned by a decree. Just, at some point, gone, and never rebuilt. Which raises the real question underneath all of this. If we cannot even say for certain how it was lost, can we say for certain what it actually was in the first place? Modern historians have taken up that question with the same tools used on any ancient artifact, comparison, language, and the physical objects that do survive from the same world. The leading scholarly view holds that the Urim and Thummim were most likely a set of two flat, marked lots, perhaps engraved stones or sticks, one meaning yes, and one meaning no. Drawn blind from the hidden pocket in the breastpiece, whichever one the priest's hand found first was read as God's answer. Simple, physical, and entirely dependent on which stone came out. Some scholars point to a puzzling verse describing a third, unclear outcome alongside the yes and the no, hinting that a drawn blank, or no stone emerging clearly at all, may have meant simply, no answer given. If that reading holds, it would perfectly explain Saul's story. Not a malfunction. Not silence from technical failure. A real, recognized third outcome that the whole nation understood as a closed door. Other scholars lean toward a different picture entirely, that the Urim and Thummim were not separate objects at all, but a name for the 12 tribal stones themselves, functioning together as a single sacred instrument. Under that view, the true mechanism was never physically separate from the stones everyone could already see. The mystery was not a hidden object at all, only the process by which they were read. There are other theories too. Ancient dice-like lots. A folded parchment slipped inside the pouch. Even a kind of ceremonial coin. Every serious historian who studies this admits the same thing in the end. We are reconstructing the shape of something from the hole it left behind, not from the object itself. No confirmed Urim or Thummim has ever been unearthed. It may be the single most important lost artifact in the entire Bible. Which brings the story to its own quiet, honest edge. After centuries of shaping a nation's wars, its kings, and its borders, what these objects actually were has simply never been recovered. And yet the pattern they left behind across Scripture is not vague at all. It is sharp, consistent, and strange in exactly the same way from Joshua, to Saul, to David, to the priests waiting at the ruins of the temple. A physical object, worn over the heart, that could return only a yes, a no, or nothing at all. And a nation that treated that silence, when it came, as seriously as any word ever spoken aloud. In an age obsessed with certainty, that is a strange thing to sit with. A channel to the divine that was allowed to say nothing at all, and was trusted precisely because it could. Because a system that only ever answered yes could never truly be trusted. It is the honest possibility of silence that makes every answered question mean something. So return to that hand, reaching into the sacred pouch, closing around the gemstones inside. We now know far more about that moment than the plain page of the text ever tells us. We know it was reserved for the nation's gravest decisions. We know it produced a real, binary verdict. We know it could fall silent, and that when it did, kings could lose their kingdoms. We know it likely worked through drawn stones or lots, sealed inside that hidden in a pocket, read by touch and by faith rather than by sight. And we know, with equal certainty, that the last working example anyone possessed simply vanished somewhere in the ashes of a fallen kingdom, and was never rebuilt, never rediscovered, never fully explained again. What remains is the shape it left in the record, a God who chose, through a priest's closed hand, whether to speak at all, and a people who listened just as closely to the silence as to the answer. Lights and perfections, the ancient names still whisper, for an object whose true shape has been dark for over 2,000 years. And somewhere in that darkness, a hand is still reaching in, waiting to learn whether the answer will be yes, or no, or nothing at all.